If you think winter camping is peaceful, you need to hear this true story before you ever zip a tent again. This really happened in the mountains of Colorado, and it still keeps me up at night. Before we start, hit like and subscribe to MR.NightSleep so you never miss a new scary story. It was late January when my friend Mark called me with an idea. He said, "Winter camping is quiet. No crowds, no bugs, just fresh snow and stars." I had camped in summer plenty of times, but never in the dead of winter. We checked the forecast, packed heavy gear, and drove 3 hours into the mountains. By the time we parked at the empty trailhead, the sun was already low and orange. Our breath hung in the air like smoke as we pulled on our packs. There were no other cars, no fresh tire marks, only old frozen tracks and silence. The trail wound through dark pine trees, heavy with snow. Every step made a deep crunch that sounded way too loud in the still air. Have you ever felt like the woods are listening to you? That is exactly how it felt. We reached a small frozen lake just as the light started to fade. The surface was solid ice with a thin layer of snow, like white glass. We found an old fire ring made of rocks and decided to set up there. It looked like no one had used it in months. While Mark gathered wood, I walked a slow circle around the campsite. That is when I saw the footprints, not ours. They were older, half filled with snow, going from the tree line straight toward the lake, but they did not come back. They just stopped at the edge of the ice, like someone walked out and vanished. I called Mark over and we both stared at them for a long time. He laughed it off and said, "Maybe someone went ice fishing and we just do not see their tracks back." But the wind had not covered ours at all yet. Those prints looked wrong, and my gut knew it. By the time we set up the tent and got a small fire going, it was full dark. The sky was clear and full of stars, but the forest felt way too close. The trees around the lake made a black ring, like a wall. We cooked simple food, talked about work, about life, tried to act normal. Every now and then I thought I heard something out in the trees, just one extra crunch in the snow, then nothing. When you are deep in the woods, your brain plays games with sound. At least, that is what I told myself. Around midnight, the fire was just glowing coals and the temperature had dropped hard. We crawled into the tent, zipped it shut, and lay in our sleeping bags. The only sounds were the faint hiss of the wind and our breathing. I was almost asleep when I heard it. A slow, steady crunch in the snow not far from the tent. One step, then another, then another. The steps were careful, like whoever it was did not want to be heard. I thought it might be a deer or maybe an elk, so I held my breath and listened. The footsteps moved around the side of the tent, then stopped right by my head. There was only thin fabric and cold air between me and whatever was out there. Mark whispered, "You hear that too, right?" I whispered back, "Yeah, stay still." The next sound made every hair on my body stand up. Something started brushing lightly against the tent wall. Not claws, not paws. It was like fingers testing the fabric. Mark grabbed his flashlight and said he was going to unzip the door. Before he could move, a voice spoke from outside the tent. It was low, almost a whisper, but clear enough. It said, "Too cold to be out here, boys." We both froze. The voice was right outside, but there had been no sound of anyone walking up. Mark called out, "Who is there?" There was no answer, not a step, not a breath, nothing. He unzipped the tent in one quick motion and blasted the flashlight out into the night. Snow, trees, the dead fire, but no person, no animal, no movement at all. We both stepped out, light shaking in his hand, and spun in a slow circle. The snow around our tent was smooth except for our own prints. There were no fresh tracks, nothing that could have made footsteps that loud and that close. We stood there in the freezing air, listening so hard it hurt. The forest was completely silent. No wind, no animals, no voice. Mark tried to laugh, but it came out thin. He said, "Maybe sound is bouncing off the trees weird. Maybe someone's camping across the lake." We walked down to the shore and scanned the far side with the flashlight. Only dark trees and empty snow stared back at us. Back in the tent, sleep was almost impossible. My eyes kept going to the thin nylon, waiting to see a shadow against it. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next time I woke up it was worse. Something was pressing down on the corner of my sleeping bag near my feet. Not hard, just enough that I could feel weight. I thought Mark had shifted and dropped his arm on me, but he was turned away. I pulled my feet back, and the weight lifted. Then I heard breathing. Not from Mark's side of the tent. It was at the entrance, slow, heavy, right next to the zipper. I whispered his name and he answered right away, like he had been awake the whole time. He said, "You hear that?" Right at the door. The breathing went on for a few seconds more, then stopped like someone held their breath. We did not unzip the tent this time. We just lay there, frozen, until somehow the darkness felt thinner and a gray light started to show. Morning finally came, and I have never been so glad to see daylight. We crawled out of the tent, our boots stiff from the cold. The first thing I did was look at the snow around the entrance. My stomach dropped. There was a single line of footprints leading from the tree line straight to our tent. The prints stopped inches from the door. Toes pointed toward it, but there were no prints going back. Just like the ones at the lake, they started and ended in the middle of nowhere. These prints were large, like a tall man in heavy boots. The snow was pressed deep, like whoever it was had stood there for a long time. I looked at Mark and saw that he was just as pale as I felt. We packed up in record time, barely talking. The woods felt different in the daylight, but not safer. It felt like something was still there, just past the tree line, watching us leave. On the hike back, we ran into a park ranger near the trailhead. He asked where we had stayed, and when we told him about the frozen lake, his face changed. He said, "You two are the first campers out there this winter. No one has checked in for that area in months." I told him about the footprints and the voice outside the tent. He listened, then said something that still bothers me. He said, "Every few years we get stories like yours from that lake, always in the snow. People hear things, see tracks that do not make sense. Some even see a man standing on the ice in the middle of the night, but when they shine a light on him, there is no one there." We drove home in almost complete silence. When I finally got back, I searched online for that lake in old news. I found a short article from years ago about a man who went missing while winter camping there. No body was ever found, just a trail of footprints that led out onto the ice, and then stopped. To this day, I will not camp in the snow again. Sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I swear I can hear that same slow breathing by my door. Would you still go winter camping after hearing this? What do you think was outside our tent that night? A person, a spirit, or something else? Tell me your theory in the comments, and share this story with a friend who loves creepy camping tales. And if you want more true winter camping stories, make sure you are subscribed and watching for the next one here on Mr. Night.